Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Bikini in the Brain. We're here in our almost set at this point.
Yes, we're getting closer and closer to the real setup. It's getting there though, right?
Yeah,
we're getting
close.
more and more professional every time.
So the sound should be better, and we got this beautiful rainbow brick wall for Ashley. I thought it was very fitting.
I love it. I love the 80s, I love the 90s design, so this is perfect, very bright.
And speaking of bright, you had a bright idea.
Bright idea.
With this podcast. What was the episode today?
Well, I was thinking the other day, Adam, I'm like, man, do you ever see like advertisements from like, let's say 1950 or 1960? And it's like, everyone's in pretty decent shape, it seems like, if you look at footage. And I know back in that time, they weren't as obsessed with like health and fitness and going to the gym and dieting as we are now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd see a little bit here and there. You'd see like those advertisements or whatever at the gym where they do the jiggle machine. What era was that really? The jiggle
50s,
machine.
50s.
The 50s?
Yeah.
So like we know now that doesn't work, but it wasn't like it is today. You see fad diets everywhere. You see gyms everywhere. People are just really into health and fitness. So I think it's very interesting that even though we're more obsessed now with health and fitness, most of us aren't as in shape as, let's say, the people from that era. I mean, of course, we have more in shape people now, like as far as like leanness and putting on muscle, but I would say like the vast majority of people are obese or overweight in America. So
40%.
Yeah, 40%. So that's kind of high.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's basically, it's almost half. I think it's going to creep there pretty soon. I know it's more than half are overweight, but 40% are obese.
Okay, so, yes. And there's a distinction between overweight and obese.
Yeah, just
but
having a high
most
BMI.
are overweight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So that wasn't the case back then.
No.
And I think it's important to kind of address why, or kind of, give some reasonings for that, because even though we don't live in those times, I think a lot of those kind of reasonings could apply to today and make you even more fit than you are now, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, especially when it comes to like the type of people that we work with and stuff. So like the prep people, the real extreme fitness people, these things actually make a difference in how they're approaching it, And so I think it's really cool, to dive into this a little bit and go into. So first off, which is a stat that you showed with me, was that, just to give you some context of this, back in the 50s, the average size women's waistline was 27 inches. And now the average woman's waist size is,
34.
34 inches.
That's quite the jump.
7 inches, which is, if you think about it, that's 1 inch a decade. Yeah, because it's seven decades since 1950. So, that's 1 inch a decade. So in 10 more decades, that means that, would they have 47 inches?
Oh, let's hope not.
But I mean,
at the rate we're going, though.
Yeah, what's to stop it, right?
Yeah.
And especially with like how you see today with the whole fat acceptance thing that I've talked about, and we'll talk about that one day soon too, but it's like becoming more normal.
Right.
And what's crazy too is that with all the trade deals we do, we're actually, like, America kind of leads the way in that, unfortunately, in obesity. And with all the trade deals we're doing, we're teaching the rest of the world to eat the way we're eating, which is unfortunate because a lot of these countries are getting our foods, So it was funny. I saw this thing yesterday. It was really cool, and I want to do it with some of my international people. And actually, I think it'd be really fun. If any of you are my international people, I'd like to do this. It's pretty fun. They went to McDonald's in America, and then they went to McDonald's in the UK, and they tested. They weighed everything differently. So they weighed the fries, they weighed the burgers, they weighed everything. And the drinks were crazy. The drinks in America were like...
Oh, yeah.
It was...
Think of like the 7-Eleven, the big Slurpees and stuff. Those things are huge. And people, like, you see them. You know that person that, like, literally brings that and then they're just sipping on it throughout the day. Like, that's so much sugar.
It's crazy, yeah.
So much.
So, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing going... And we talk about, like, today and why people are getting fatter and why... And I think when you hear these things, it really helps with the contest prep mindset, too.
Yes.
Because you're like, okay, why do I want these foods? Why is it hard for me, right? So Yeah, so I don't know what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, I mean, I hear kind of sometimes, like on the news or just some random mainstream news article, that it's like they kind of contribute it or blame it to like one certain thing. It's like, oh, because of high fructose corn syrup now, or oh, red number 40 is making. And I mean, obviously, I think a lot of that's just for the clicks and for the views. And you can really find any study to kind of fit your narrative, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really think it's necessarily one particular thing. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. And even before we go into diet, let's talk about lifestyle in general. So what we know now, and we see it happening before our eyes, is machines and technology are taking over, really. I mean, things that we do with like machines now, and they weren't available back in the day, they kind of had to do it manually. Just think of like dishwashers, washing machines. Now we even have robotic vacuums. I know you have one. I have one too.
Yeah.
I love those things. But just think about if we didn't have those things, we would be spending more time doing the manual labor, like sweeping ourselves rather than pressing a button. We would be washing the dishes ourselves rather than putting it in a wash machine.
Yeah.
And right now, our lives are too convenient, to a fault, you know? We have apps and technology for everything. We have grocery shopping apps.
Yeah.
I hate when you use your grocery shopping app because I love grocery shopping. I hate when you use
I did it yesterday.
No, you're ruining all the fun. That's the funnest part of the week, grocery shopping.
Yeah, you know what's funny? The whole grocery shopping thing too, when we talk about one of the major contributors of people gaining weight, and it being actually hard for people to stay in shape now, which is, could you imagine if everyone was walking around with a 27-inch waist? I have, regular people who are like that are doing decent in the off season and have a 27-inch waist, like 26. And I'm like, they're like trying to stay in shape, right? And they're doing what everyone averaged, 7. That's crazy to think about. Like, this person is diligently trying, but because they're like a lot less active and there's a lot more abundance of foods, that it's actually harder to do that. It's crazy to think about. So I was doing a little bit of research on this, and I thought it was pretty interesting because a lot of it came down to NEAT, which we talk about NEAT all the time. So NEAT, if you guys haven't been listening, is non-exercise activity-induced thermogenesis. So basically means the more you move, the more calories you burn. It's really a fancy way of saying you move, you burn calories. Simple as that. And so when we're doing like contest stuff or extreme fitness stuff, your body will kind of tend to shut down its NEAT. You'll stop doing things like fidgeting your fingers, and you don't want to go to the kitchen and make a sandwich. You're like, oh, I don't want to get up. I'll just make 2 sandwiches later.
Right.
That type of thing. Or you're just, hey, let's go to the mall, babe. And you're like, no, I'm tired. I just want to sit here, right? So what I've found too as like a coach is that when you have people doing a lot of cardio, so let's say you give someone an hour of cardio, 2 hours of cardio, what I find is that person just takes that extra time and then they just do less things. So they might have done like 60 minutes of movement throughout the day, and then you give them an hour and a half of cardio, and then they end up just not doing that extra hour of movement.
Right.
So it's like it almost neutralizes itself because it's like your body's trying to find a way to conserve energy because you're just burning so much. So it's kind of crazy to think about, like back in the day, everyone was just walking around all the time.
Right.
In 1950s, it was only, I think it was 15% of people actually had a car.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy.
with that, and then also the other thing is the supermarket wasn't a thing. So it was, you'd go to your butcher, you'd go to your, your grain person, you go to the fruit stand, you go to the whatever. So the way that you get groceries was totally different now too. Like you're just saying, like I do it on the app. I mean, they're even making the apps lazy. Like, what did you buy last time? Purchase again? One button, and it gets sent to you again. Like I'm even a lazy apper.
Oh man, yeah, it's like crazy. And food delivery too, and Postmates and all that. Think about like back in like the 1950s, they were making the food themselves.
Yeah.
It took effort, and they kind of put love into it, It took time even just to make it. So now it's just like too convenient.
Yeah.
It's just, everything just comes to us. We barely have to even lift a finger.
Yeah, what's really funny too. And I live in this like first world extreme convenience scenario because you guys I work with Trifecta, and so does Ashley, and I don't think they sent me food last week. And then I was like, Anya, did we get any Trifecta last week? She's like, no, you didn't get any for like, I think maybe 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, I don't think maybe they're not sending me food right now or something. But they were, and we had so much food at the house because Samantha was there too, and she had her food being delivered. We just got them all mixed up, and I was like, I don't know what's new, what's what. There's just a refrigerator full of pre-made meals, right? So they send me. I was like, it was like Thursday. They always send me my food on Friday. I was like, well, how am I gonna eat? What am I gonna do? I don't know what to do. Like if my food's not ready.
Buy another freezer.
Ready, packaged, delivered to me.
Yeah.
Like, and I just put it in the microwave. I'm like, I don't know what to even do now. I'm just, it's so funny. I was like, I guess I'll buy some groceries. I bought groceries, but then Trifecta came. Yeah, we had it the whole time. It's just we had so much food I couldn't identify when what things came. Because Samantha was there. She had 2 boxes. It was just so much food at the house. Yeah. And it's crazy to think about, right? Because back in the day, you didn't even have food at all. Like, you couldn't even have, what was it? In the 50s, they were saying it was less than 30% of people had refrigerators. So you'd only have food for like
buy it fresh
every day.
And you'd most likely walk because only 15%
of people had a car.
Had cars, and they didn't have Ubers, they didn't have cabs.
Yeah.
Like now we have Ubers. Like even if something is, let's say, half a mile away, most likely somebody's going to order an Uber.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where you could just walk. But since it's so convenient, it's just like, oh, I'll just order the Uber.
Yeah.
Don't want to walk. No. See, it's just becoming way too convenient. And even think about back in the day, they didn't have many escalators, not many elevators. They took the stairs.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh man, there's stairs. Let me just get the escalator, you know?
Yeah.
It's too convenient to a fault. Unfortunately, as we evolve as a society and everything's so technologically advanced, we get lazier and lazier. We move less. Everything's sedentary. Jobs are sedentary now.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where there was, a husband who worked at the car manufacturer and put it together by hand. Machines do it now. Everything's like online on the computer, and we're less likely to get up and do the labor ourselves. I mean, there still are jobs like that, obviously, but a lot of times you'll find that their jobs have been taken over by robots, machines.
Yeah, they're talking about that. You heard about that? They're talking about that taxing companies that they're like robotizing jobs. Is that a word, robotizing? Oh. I don't think that's right. But like they're talking about like taxing big corporations that can take away a job through a robot. So because they're not going to be paying the employee anymore, and they're making a ton of income off of that. So they're going to be taxing, like you have to pay a robot tax or something.
Robot tax.
Which I guess they're trying to make it so it goes to like universal basic income because so many people are going to maybe be unemployed due to the robot boom. Isn't that crazy? That's the one. You know what's funny? I'm all about like capitalism and free market, but and little government. But that's one of the things where I'm like, okay, if a robot's taking away a job from a human, I could see why you could tax a company, because it's such a. So that's one of the weird things that I don't like. It's not my normal thing I'd agree with, right?
Yeah.
So because they're making enough, they can pay that.
Well, no one's going to replace you by a robot.
No, yeah, I don't know. It's probably.
No.
It's probably.
No.
I mean, you can run a bunch of algorithms to come up with scenarios to fix like obesity issues, right? And like you don't need me to think anymore, kind of scenario. I mean, I don't know where the human element stops. Right, so
yeah, it's crazy to think. I mean, gosh, we've advanced so far in the past 50 years. It's crazy to think of the next 50 years how that's gonna look like.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I watch too much of it though.
Yeah.
So, but I like these things because it keeps me looking at other stuff.
Right.
So, okay, so one of the things I think we should talk about too is why. So not just the convenience of people and why they're moving less and burning less calories and eating more food, but why are they eating more food? That's the important thing. Mm-hmm. And so I want to give you a couple of kind of alarming scenarios of like food companies and what their goal is to do. So first off, let's go into like the science of food and eating. This is the kind of the crazy thing. So when you eat, here's the thing, you got to look at like how we were even pre-50s, like, and we were talking like 1900s, and we're just trying to find food. And that's like the main goal of life back then wasn't, convenience and who has the nicest car and biggest house. It was just purely survival. It was a survival and eating all day and like just trying to find food. And back then, so even in the 50s, it was 98% of people worked some type of agricultural job. Mm-hmm. So whether it was like working in offices for farming or working for whatever for farming or working on the farm. It was all related to farm stuff because everyone's just trying to eat. There wasn't that much technology. Right. So now it's less than 2% of people actually have a farm job, right? So it's like of some type of associated with the farm. So one, everything was fresh food, organic, all that, right? So when we're trying to, like, back in the days, way back in the days, when we're trying to find calorie dense foods, we didn't have labels. You got to understand. And you got to, like, take yourself back to that time to kind of understand the raw human element of this. Like, think about you, and you have you and your family. There's no telephones. Everyone's, miles away to walk. You kind of just sit with your family and your tribe, right? You're just whoever's in your group. That's where the conversations come from. Everything comes from. Well, you'd go out and you'd find food. Well, there's no labels on food. Calories weren't even identified yet. So you had no conception of calorie dense foods, no calorie dense foods. I mean, you don't know even some things, what are food, what isn't food. So you kind of have this natural finder in your brain for you. And that's just a chemical response to food, which is going to be, a dopamine response. And basically it's like a pleasure response. So if you were going around and you're like, oh, maybe I'll eat this, and it's a leaf, right? You got to remember, to us, that sounds stupid. Eating a leaf would sound, why would you eat a leaf? That's stupid. That's not salad, right? Well, you didn't have anyone telling you, you know what I mean? It was just whoever found the food originally that was edible or not would tell you, oh yeah, that's edible, that's not edible. Yeah. Like your concept of food was so different. So what happens is, even if you found something that was really, really calorie dense, like let's say you found honey, right? And you knew it was super, super calorie dense. Well, you wouldn't know it's calorie dense. You just would know it's honey and it's sweet, right? You're like, oh, this stuff tastes good. You don't know that you're benefiting from the calories, right? So how do you identify back then the difference between a leaf and sugar that's actually super calorie dense? Well, you can't. So what happens is your body tells you, right? So it tells you by releasing these endorphins and saying, hey, that's good, eat more of that. Leaf, no release, right? You're not going to eat many leaves, right? It's not very fun, it's not enjoyable, it doesn't taste good. And so some people think that taste is a direct response of the endorphins released from different foods.
So much sense, but I never thought of it in that way. It makes sense.
So I don't know the science of that. I'm just giving you my basic synopsis of what I know. But what I do know is this. Anything that's calorie dense, that's fat dense, that's sugar dense, that's salt dense for electrolytes, your body will automatically say, I want more of that. That shit's good, right? It's not like eating leaves. So when you're out, when you're in the 1900s and you're trying to find something and you find a fatty piece of meat that's going to sustain life for a long period of time, because if you guys see the trend here, I always am relating prep, dieting, all that to like sustainability of life, because that's all it is. And I'm always like, when you're super lean and jacked and have a lot of muscle, that's as close to you like getting leaving all your calories and dying as you can be, because you have no calorie reserves and you have a lot of calorie burning going on with your body. So just remember, everything's about survival and preservation. So for us to preserve our life, we need extra calories, especially back then when we didn't know when we were going to eat. It's a lot of feast and famine. Try to eat in the 1900s during the winter. If you lived in, Denver, it's going to be pretty hard, So that's what happens. Your body says, hey, this is good. Fill up on this. Keep going, right? And so that's what happens. So food companies evolved till today, right? That's not a scenario we have anymore. We don't have to search for food. You just go to 7-Eleven, you can find whatever you want. Now, what foods are there at the 7-Eleven though, right? Well, the foods that they sell are the ones that we would have sought after, just mixed in a different way. Now, so when you look at a pack of Doritos or a chocolate cake or whatever, right? There's the food companies have found and used this science against us, where they're like, okay, how do I get like Frito-Lay's, like, I bet you can't eat just one. You're like, yeah, you're right, I can't, right? Like, you did a good job at getting me to not eat just one. And the reason is that they've found the perfect blends of foods that make our dopamine spike and make our endorphins really go, and then we get addicted to food. So, and it's not just like the regular it's not just like obese people, like everyone has that response. So, just for example, Frito-Lay has over 40 scientists. They have $30 million a year in research on getting people to eat more of their product, which is crazy to think about. So when we're in like contest and we're like wanting these foods, you got to understand the science of it. For me, it helps to understand the science of it. And I'm like, okay, That's just me wanting to eat calorie-dense foods, not because I really want it. It's because my body needs more energy stores, and it's telling me right now, go get that shit that has a lot of calories in it, because we're kind of running out of calories, right? So I think it's important to understand that, because if you can like relate back to the hunger of what's happening, like, why do I want this so bad? Why do I want this so bad? You're like, well, I'm running out of energy. It's purely an energy in and energy out thing. So if you can like break it down to the chemical, you're like, and you're just like, oh, internal hunger thing, just shut up, right? It's like a little easier in prep to like know why, for me at least. I don't know if I dropped anything new to you on that.
No, it's from what I'm getting it is it's almost like a natural selection of your taste buds, right?
Yeah.
Like back in the caveman days.
Yeah.
You related something that's maybe sweet or fatty. Oh, this tastes good. I got to eat more.
Yeah.
So you do, and then you find, oh, this keeps me going longer, because back in those times, like, it was about survival, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, this disgusting leaf that has like 5 calories in it or whatever. And then over time, maybe those taste buds or those people with those kind of taste buds lasted longer because it figured out or whatever. But I think that's very interesting because it makes so much sense, yet I never really correlated that to the primitive times whenever we were in need of food all the time. So it's like, that makes so much sense.
It's cool, right? To understand that stuff.
Some dots here.
It's basically an internal map to where are the calories.
Yeah.
Right? And back when no one had any systems of what was calorie dense and what wasn't.
Yeah.
We didn't even know what calories were back then. That's what's crazy to think. Like, imagine like eating and not even knowing why you're eating.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy to think about back then. And then these guys had to do it. I mean, like, some of these families that lived in a good area, like, never even starved to death. So they never even probably understood the concept, because it wasn't like, even way back then, it wasn't like books and this and internet, and like, they probably just understood, oh, I just eat. Like, it probably wasn't even, I don't know. It's just crazy to like put yourself in that scenario. I wonder how it really was, I wonder how it went. So
very, very interesting.
Right, cool.
Very interesting.
The crazy thing is about Frito-Lay. That's the crazy thing. They even have, at Frito-Lay, they have a $40,000 machine, and it's just a mouth. It's weird. It's a $40,000 machine that goes up and down and chews like a mouth. That's what it is. It's got teeth on it. It chews like a mouth, and they put chips in it, and they measure the sound so they can hear the crunch, so they can see if they're doing their chips right with enough crunch to get you to eat more.
Oh my!
That's
so extra.
It's insane. With 40 food scientists, like, and you're, so yeah, when you're wanting to eat these foods, like, the cards are stacked against you. That shit's good for a reason. I always, whenever I eat something bad, I always say to myself, no wonder people are fat. This shit's good.
Yeah.
Like, when I eat like a piece of pizza, I'm always like, I always say it to myself, and I can't stop doing it. I'm like, no wonder people are fat. Like, this is it. So me, like, my life's mission, when I was 16 and I walked into a nutrition store, I decided to pick a fight with fat. I always say that. I picked a fight with fat. I've done it for 20 plus years, and I'm losing, right? And so, like, these types of talks, like, I think help us get ahead. And I really want it. That's really where I want the direction to go to, is like a lot of like helping regular people lose body fat, especially kids. That's something I really want to go into. Like, when we get this place up and running fully, I want to have like some type of something for kids that'll, like, I've been talking about it for a while, but like a nonprofit or something for kids to like really get them fit. Like, I don't know what we do with it, but I think it'd be really fun. We have a good group here to be able to help out with that,
Right. It's interesting because although in our industry, and I assume everyone that's listening to this has at least some idea of what a healthy food is in comparison to like junk food or whatever, but you would be surprised what the normal population of people think is healthy. They think like Nutri-Grain bars are healthy, fruit pie is healthy because it has fruit in it, right? Yeah. Things like that. And it's like, I don't think we even realize, because we're so amongst ourselves, and we're fitness people, right? We know without even thinking, without even looking at a nutrition label, what is healthy and what's not. But the average person might not know. And let's be honest, in school, I don't know if they still teach this way, but man, their idea of how you should structure your dietary limits or whatever is so off.
Yeah, the food pyramid.
So off, yes. When I was growing up, the food pyramid, which at the bottom, which means you should be getting the most, is carbohydrates. Like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
What the heck is that bull crap? You know? And it's like, we know now that, well, that's definitely not the case. Unless you have some strange medical condition where you have to, for some reason, consume more than anything else. But that is not the case for most people. And I think, too, is, you know, they kind of base it off a 2,000 calorie diet, which we've kind of gone into this before in a previous podcast.
Yeah.
But a 2,000 calorie diet. So a lot of people out there are thinking, yeah, I got to consume 2,000 calories a day. And they might be a 5'2" woman, you know?
Yeah.
And that's probably, especially with the sedentary lifestyle that we're all living, that's
totally
definitely going to be
scenario.
an excess amount of calories.
I think that was done, and maybe you can fact check me on this, but I think it was in the 80s they did it, and that 2,000 calories was based on a 147-pound male, so it must have been like a high school male or something. So that's where the 2,000 calorie thing came from. It was something similar to that. So maybe someone could leave it in the comments or something. But it wasn't like a scenario of like where a woman at 5 foot, 100 pounds, right? So we had a girl the other day. She actually left a comment. She's like, "You said Ashley's doing relatively high in calories, and she's like 1,600 plus calories right now." She's like, "No wonder I'm gaining weight. I'm 5'2", 170, and I'm told to eat 1,700 calories." And I was like, "Yeah." So with that's a perfect example, you know, not
Actually,
everyone.
I think she said 2,000.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Okay, well there you go. So
I could be wrong.
Yeah, so whatever.
Unless we're thinking of two different comments.
But in her mind, because she was told 2,000 calories what you should eat, right? But not necessarily for her. That's a lot of calories for someone who's little, you know. So it's very, very, very case dependent. And then one thing I forgot to mention too was the whole like cycle of eating food that we kind of talked about a little bit, and like the endorphins response. So the other response you get is dopamine, which kind of tells you, like, it creates habits. Hey, you did a good job by doing that. It like reassures you. So you kind of like search out that, okay, let's get the endorphins so I can get the dopamine to tell me that I did a good job and I'm happy with myself, right? And you kind of like form these habits. And so one of the things that that we could do with doing this is, you know, break that habit by understanding like the method of it and what's going on. And they actually tested this in rats as well, which is a really cool study. These rats, they always get in the short end of the stick, huh? So
are we? It's interesting that they do, like, seems like they do most of the testing on rats, like as if they're comparable to us. And like, I don't know, why is that?
So,
or are they just so easy to, I guess, keep in kid? I don't know.
There's a lot of similarities with there's a lot of similarities with them and humans. It's why it's one of the things, like, with like how their digestive systems and all these different things.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like it's. I mean, without it being a human, it's like
now
one of the
you
closest
got to
things.
look at the rats differently.
Yeah, it's like they're like second or third, and then like the closest thing that we could do, we wouldn't do tests on, would be like it was chimpanzees, because those are like the most. Isn't that?
That rats are that similar. Huh?
Well, there's a lot of similarities, and that's why they can test them and actually apply it to humans, because a lot of the same things happen cellularly with rats. Yeah,
Okay.
I looked it up once. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, but they did this thing with rats where they gave them. So this scientist was. This is kind of what's crazy. The scientist was trying to get rats fat by giving them food. He overfed them, and they wouldn't get fat. No matter what he did, they wouldn't get fat. So they would just eat whatever much food they wanted, and then they'd stop when they were full. Isn't that nuts? Like, naturally, they just would stop when they had an abundance of food. But then he started giving them things like Fruit Loops and calorie-dense foods and whatnot, and then he was able to get rats fat. Like, he was able to get them fat, and so that's when like they started realizing that there's the kind of the addictive qualities of calorie-dense foods.
Right,
And
food for fuel versus food for pleasure.
Yeah, and so they're the reward of that and the pleasures of it is what they kind of identified. Okay, we can make someone who's super structured in their eating and mess it up and make them where they're just all they want is food and won't stop eating if we just change the foods, the way the foods work. And so that's, you know, when you go out, when you look outside, I mean, it's crazy out there. What we say, it's getting crazy out there. But like, you go outside, like literally we could drive out of this parking lot and there'll be nothing healthy. Like, you have to drive to find something healthy versus unhealthy is like in every corner here. I think the closest like chicken bowl place to here, which is like, you know, it's a 2-mile, 3-mile drive. And on the way there, I'll find, you know, I don't know how many burger joints. I mean, I'll have a Carl's Jr., an In-N-Out, McDonald's, a Burger King, that's all on the way to the healthier chicken
Yeah.
place. Like, and that's just one street, like a block, you know, it's crazy. So like everything's definitely against you when it comes to that stuff. And I think it's funny, as I get older and I'm more like in the industry longer, I'm able to more empathize with people more about that, because I grew up too hardcore, I think, like where I couldn't relate to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it was like all I knew was gym and eat right. Like, you know, like it was like, even when I was younger, it was like weird. And it was like, if you had to give in to your temptation, it was like weak. You're like, what are you doing? Like, you don't do that. Like, but that's like hardcore Venice Beach bodybuilder. Like, it just didn't matter. Like, back then, especially, it was like, you eat every 2 hours, you eat chicken, like bigger than your fist, vegetables, your fist, glass of milk. And like, that was it. And that's it. And it was like so hard. We were still doing like even milk though, which is really funny. And like anything other than that was like weakness, right? Type of thing. It was like this crazy like mentality of these old school bodybuilders back then, which if you think it's hardcore now, back then it was crazy hardcore. We didn't know anything even then about food, really. We didn't know as much as we do now. So as I've gotten older, I've been able to evolve more and like be open to it and hearing more and learning more about it. And so it's definitely like eye-opening, like for why people struggle. And I think why, like if you're in prep, why you're so damn hungry, because you're used to having things like that, you know?
So it's like actually maybe even more of a craving type thing mixed with hunger. Like sometimes it is hard for people to distinguish true hunger and a craving, you know?
Yeah.
And if you've had something for a long time, you're gonna want it more, which is why I kind of say sometimes like, you know, after a show, I might have like something, but I don't want to like get into that habit, because the more I taste the real, like I guess American diet food, it's kind of like a slippery slope, and then you want more and more, and then you start looking at your chicken and vegetables like, you know, it's not as good as it used to. So it's kind of like, you know, it's the more you get used to eating something, the easier it becomes. But even going back to food a little bit, and you mentioned like you have to drive far just to get something healthy. And in addition to that too, is like we're thinking like convenience stores and gas stations, those are even more common than grocery stores. Like maybe there's like 5 of those types of stores in comparison to like a grocery store. But like think about even to like at gas stations and stuff, they're not going to stock produce usually. I mean, sometimes I'll actually see like an apple or a banana, you know.
A proud banana for 40 cents.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, if we're thinking too, like the more shelf stable food items are going to be the unhealthy stuff, because this is going to be like straight sugar, straight fat, you know, cookies or something like chips, you know, because it stays there longer. You don't have to worry about refrigerating it and all that. But even thinking back to like the marketing of it, like I think some of the appeal too is like the flashiness and glam of like unhealthy snacks. We got the pretty wrappers, the advertisements, and the colored foods, you know, oh my gosh, it's pink, it's blue, it's whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily like why it's unhealthy, but it draws your eye to it, if that makes sense. It's like flashy, it's fun, you want to eat it, you want to try it. So I think that's also goes into some of the appeal as well. And that plus the convenience of having a snack that you can just bring with you anywhere. You can take it on the road, you know what I mean? You don't need a knife and a fork to eat the unhealthy stuff, right? Chips, whatever, just eat it as you're driving. It's no big deal. So I think that's like all the combination of all this is just like, it mixes for a bad storm, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Remember those rainbow hamburgers we had?
Oh yeah, those were fun.
I just thought of that when you said like the food colors, because if you talked about like colors and brightness and fun, like that's probably the meal I remember visually the most.
Yeah.
I don't think I remember any other meal more visually than that meal.
And it made them like kind of almost taste better.
Yeah, because it's fun.
Because it's fun, you know?
And that's that whole response thing that we have for food. So I think it's kind of cool just so you guys can get a better understanding of what's happening with your body. What's like, why are you so hungry? Why is it hard for you? Why is it even harder to just stay lean than it is to just, you know, than it is to get fat? That's crazy that it's actually harder, I think, these days to do that than to get fat. With our jobs being so sedentary, our food being so abundant and so calorie dense, our taste buds working against us, it's pretty crazy. So did I talk about the Oreos and the wraps? Did I get to that point?
No,
I didn't. Huh?
We didn't talk.
I didn't.
About
I just realized I didn't talk about it. So the whole point of that thing, I sometimes, you know, I'm not the best podcaster. Whatever. You should tune into someone else. So the wraps thing was they tested rats, and they tested like the endorphins released from rats from cocaine and from Oreos. And the spike that they got from Oreos, the endorphins release they got from Oreos, was the same or greater than multiple other drugs. Isn't that nuts? So like the addictive quality of food was kind of like there. The argument is there. So pretty nuts to think about like how powerful a good tasting food is. Oreos. Yeah, I'd rather have Oreos than cocaine.
Oreos. It's never really been my favorite cookie, but apparently
People
it's America's
love it.
favorite cookie is what it says on the wrapper.
There was a girl, you know?
Once upon a time,
How do you
there was a
identify
girl.
that? It was like the thing on the Elf, where the Elf, it said best cup of coffee on Elf. He's like, you did it! He comes and he's screaming, good job, you did it! It's so funny. There's so many places I see over here that are like best pizza, like best in Vegas, and so many best, like which one's the actual best? But yeah, I forgot what I was talking about because like Elf got excited about the Elf. What was it before that?
Well, we're talking about the Oreos being America's favorite
Oreos,
cookie.
yeah, Oreos. I had this girl, and she brought this big, like, it must have been like a Sam's Club type of Oreos. Like, it was huge. Like, how many were in there? Just trays of them. And she's like, oh, I brought them for the team, so we're going to have one. And then she was waiting. Back then, it was Bikini. Bikini was first, and then men's physique, and whatever. And we had a lot of Bikini men's physique. That's what we do. We train Bikini men's physique for the most part. And so she was waiting, she was master, so she went first, and then the open divisions all went, all that. So she was like sitting there in the aisle, like next to me, and then she had to wait for all the men's divisions to finish. And then like I wasn't really paying attention. I was watching we had a lot of competitors at that show. It was years ago. And by the time everyone got off stage, like she was just next to me, and then she had all of the cookies gone. There was like very few left, like maybe like 8 or something. Like it was very few. And she's like, Adam, I ate all of them. And I was like, what were you doing this whole time? Just eating cookies this whole time? She's like, yeah, you didn't say anything. I was like, I didn't know you were eating cookies this whole time right next to me. But it just shows you, she's like, I've never eaten that many. Why am I so hungry? And she was like almost ashamed of it, right? And I was like, that's, those cookies were designed to have you to eat all of them.
Yeah, and see, even going back to the flashiness, they're like a collector's item in a way. Everyone wants to try it because they come out with like 50 flavors, limited edition. They have a Lady Gaga Oreo right now. Kid you not.
What does that even taste like?
Apparently it tastes like crap.
I
saw a review on it. It was not good. But I'm just saying, like, just think about that marketing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you better try it now before it's limited edition. You know? And there's so many different flavors. You want to try them all. It's so flashy, right?
Yeah.
But let's even look at just what an Oreo really is. Is it really that exciting? Just the plain standard Oreo? Is it that exciting?
Yeah, it's like a plain chocolate wafer with a little bit of sweetness.
Exactly.
Yeah, but no, I totally see that too. It's funny is that that's like a thing in competitors, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, this one came out.
Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts and Oreos. Yeah, Pop-Tarts are up there, definitely. But what's funny is like when, obviously when I go visit, like, well, now Phoebe's in Dubai, but when she was in the UK, like her boyfriend Max, he's like a good buddy of mine, and he was always like, oh, can you get any of these Pop-Tarts or whatever? And I'm like, dude, like to me, I'm like, who cares? Like, he's like, no, you can't get any of those flavors in the UK. It's only like an American thing. Like they only like America, like, and that's why and it's a perfect example why America's, so fat comparatively, but they only had like basic flavors over there. And if they did have them, you had to go to like a specialty store, and they were like, he showed me, it was like, I think it was like 12 pounds, which I forget what the exchange rate was for like the regular pack. I don't know what is a regular packet. Is there 8? I don't know what's in a regular one. But he showed
the wrong person.
Yeah, he took me. Yeah, I don't know either. He took me to the store. He's like, "This is why," and so he took me, and I was like, it was like 4 times as much, and it was only like basic flavors. And he's like, "That's why everyone goes nuts over here." And if I bring them over, everyone goes nuts. I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So it's like, and I understand the excitement of it because over here in America we have every flavor all the time. Over there they have like 3 flavors, right? So it's like, it just shows you though that when you make something like new and different, that everyone wants it, and it like feeds it's almost like a limited drop clothing thing, right? Like these girls, they go nuts for the limited drops. Like, oh, there's only 1,000 pieces, like limited drop, and then the girls just go nuts and buy it because they know they can't get it later. It's like the same thing with like the Oreos, right? It like creates that urgency of I better get this, right? And then what do you do when you get it? You eat it. What else are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
So,
And something too is a great example of how like the snack foods have evolved is cereal. Oh my gosh, have you seen the cereal flavors lately? It's crazy. Like literally, I was going through the aisle. They have some crazy ones. They have like Eggo blueberry waffle cereal. Like they have it like Dunkin' Donut cereal. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. And just think about like what the cereals used to be back like 50 years ago, maybe like Cheerios, like that's it, which isn't that bad. But when you start adding like all this sugar and everything else is just like, whoa, this is no longer what cereal used to be. So it's just a crazy thing to me.
Yeah. So anyway, so basically with you guys being like so health and fitness oriented and having your desire to have the cheats, I just think the synopsis of this one is just understanding why, understanding that the foods are kind of designed to go against you. I mean, and there's even so much power in foods these days that's like, it's nuts. Like By the
way, I've been counting. You've said nuts at least 5 or 6
Have
times.
I? I'm going to try to limit it.
Say, what's not a fat? Say a good
kale?
fiber.
Kale. I'll say
kale.
So instead of saying so nuts. So you want to hear something?
Nuts are good.
Want to hear something kale?
Yes.
so the food companies that have lobbyists that are like pushing different narratives of like, oh, it's not our foods, it's your lack of exercise, right? They're trying to push this. And yeah, actually what's crazy is that even Coca-Cola did this and they got caught like saying, like they spent money trying to convince people that it's not the foods that you're eating, drink more Coke, it's the lack of activity that you're doing, do more exercise.
Well, that's true too, but it's mostly probably the Coke.
Yeah, but what's really crazy is, so they were forced to like put a public apology in the United States, but China actually accepted it and actually pushed it in the narrative of that, of you need to move more, Coke's okay. Like, because they have the money to fund these different lobbyists to push different narratives politically, which is nuts. That's big food working against you, you know? So it's nuts to know, but that's a real thing. Yeah, it's kale to know. That's a real thing. And so like everything, like even the information you hear about foods, like you have to look at, okay, where did that come from? Who paid for the study? Is it paid for by Coke? Well, obviously, it's pro Coke.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at like the fructose thing that you talked about, and fructose does get a really bad name, but the only reason fructose gets a bad name, high fructose corn syrup, is that it's cheaper than sugar. And so because it's cheaper than sugar, it's about 20 to 40 cents on the dollar of sugar, depending. And so when you're talking spending 20 to 40 cents on the dollar for sugar, well, then you can make your product cheaper, and of course you're going to use fructose. If sugar was cheaper than fructose, then sugar would have a bad name. That's really it. It just comes down to pennies. It comes down to how can I save 1 penny here versus 1 penny there.
Right.
So that's the only reason. It's just the cheapest, most available sugar. The next thing that comes out that's cheaper, more available, that will get a bad name in place of it because it'll be in more stuff. So it's just sugar is sugar. It doesn't matter. There's I forget how many names. There's over 50 names for sugar. Like just different types of sugar. It's just sugar, you know. So like that's funny. Everyone's like, oh, it has high fructose corn syrup, put it down. But then they'll grab like raw sugar. Like it's the same thing from the neck down. It's the same. It doesn't matter. So anyway, so next time that you're eating some calorie dense foods and all these things are happening and your endorphins are going off, understand that's why.
Yes.
Maybe you can break it down to the chemical and being like, okay, this is why I like this, and I just need a little bit of it. It was great. It's kind of like really it's like a food high.
Yeah.
Okay, I got my food high. I feel good, and you don't need to eat so much of it to keep that high going.
Yes.
The problem with obesity and why it becomes another issue is that just like drugs. So when people are doing drugs and you hear that like chase the first high type of thing. Is that what's the chasing the dragon is? Is that what that is? I don't know what that is. I don't know.
Asking the wrong person
I don't know
again.
this drug stuff. Yeah. So like I don't even drink. I don't drink. I'm like the worst guy to know that stuff. But people always talk about like chasing that first high and that first time. Well, the same thing applies to like foods. So if you're like someone who's always eating those foods, it takes a lot more of those foods to get that same release.
That makes sense.
So if you have been contest prepping and you eat a piece of pizza, I mean, some of these studies, and it's a little crude, they talk about it as being as the same amount of release as like having an orgasm, which is crazy. Like for people who are food deprived, to have these types of foods, which is crazy to think about, right? So like just understand what's going on, and that if you're someone who's constantly chasing it, you're chasing that same effect. You're trying to get that release. So you're eating more of it and more of it.
Or unhealthier and healthier.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So one of the things is really good, especially with like contest prep, how we do things. A lot of people I see out there will do a hard diet, get really lean, and then they just gorge on food, and then they understand that now you can understand what's happening. So I think that having a little bit of that and keeping that high kind of going is like the best way of doing it, because you could have a little at a time every now and then. Little bite once a week, little bite. You don't need a lot. And then you could keep your body kind of sensitive to that. And then there you go. You don't need to be chasing it all the time.
And I also want to add to that as well, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So with all these foods evolving into all the crazy things that they are now, you know what else is improving as well is diet-friendly foods, okay? Oh my gosh, I always say, it is, if you know what you're doing, it's easier now to diet than ever, and I'll tell you why. Listen, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'll say like 15 years ago, protein shakes, oh my God, you could not, gag, disgusting. Like, I would smell one and be like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But now they're so good. It tastes like a freaking milkshake. If you know how to prepare it correctly, legit, you can make it taste like a milkshake. And now we have flavored sweeteners and stuff, diet drinks. We have sugar-free barbecue. Yeah. What is life? What a time to be alive.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive. Like, man, can you imagine, like 10 years ago, no one would ever have thought of sugar-free barbecue or these fun diet-friendly foods. You know, it's like you can almost, not exactly, but a lot of times substitute these unhealthy foods for diet-friendly foods. The only downside is usually those type of condiments and flavorings and sweeteners, they do cost more than like sugar. Yeah. They cost more than real barbecue, but it's worth it. And if you know what to look for, and if you know how to prepare your food correctly, you can make it taste really good with all the food technology there is now for dieting. It's just like people are just either unaware, they're afraid to try because it says like sugar-free or low-fat or diet-friendly, and they get scared automatically. They're probably like, ooh, it tastes bad, which, you know, I don't blame them. 15 years ago, it probably would have.
Yeah.
But, man, even the protein cookies now, they taste, in my opinion, just as good as regular cookies.
Yeah.
Like
I think they're pretty close.
Protein cookies, those things are freaking bomb, man.
Yeah.
They are so good.
And one bars?
Yes, 1 bars, those are good too. The Quest chips don't taste quite like regular chips, but they still taste good. Like, you know, it says I think people are afraid to try because it says like diet friendly, or, you know, so they're like, no, it's gonna taste like bad, or just that they can't afford like the more expensive healthy stuff. But I'm telling you, man, it does taste good, and it's like I don't feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way because there's so many things. Like I have Kodiak cakes, which is common, which is basically a pancake with protein in it. Yeah. And then I have, actually it's funny you talk about the expensive things. I bought yesterday two things of syrup. They're like sugar-free syrup. It was different ones. And I was like, oh, I want to try this. And it had sugar alcohol in it only as the carbohydrate. So it had 1 net carb and sugar alcohol, but they were $9.39 each. It's like, dang, for syrup, right? And like, that's a lot of money for syrup. For like a little thing
in
of
comparison to like maybe $1.50 or $2 for the full sugar.
Yeah, give me some Jemima, man. That's like $2-3.
Yeah.
So, I guess with that, anything.
Yeah, I do think there's one more point that we should briefly touch upon, and I don't want to talk about it too much because we're actually going to save this for an entire podcast episode itself. But I do think it correlates to what we're talking about. It's just the normalization in general of obesity.
Yeah.
And as far as like body representation in the media, I understand like, yeah, it's great that every, body type kind of gets their time to shine. But I guess the downside to that as well is as it becomes more normal, people don't feel the need to change. And also on top of that is there's with the medicines and the pharmaceutical industries like evolving, I think a lot of people think it's okay to be obese because they have medicines for that, right? Yeah. It's okay. If you're diabetic, they have stuff for that. You're not going to die. You can take care of it. I mean, although it's a big inconvenience, someone wants to get it, there's always that like, well, if this happens, there's something I can do about it. And everything they do about it tends to not be diet and exercise. It tends to be like a quick fix, And I think that's very harmful because although they might be appearing to be healthy now, years later, it's not going to be the case. And I just think that like the whole normalization of obesity and even to the extent of calling it healthy in some...
Yeah, they call it healthy at any size is what it is, right?
Yeah. So, it's like a fine line, because of course, like, you don't want to shame anyone for being obese, and of course obese people should be represented, but it's like, it's a difficult thing because it does become more normal. It becomes the norm to now, maybe, you know, years down the line, somebody that the population in general has gotten so obese that they might look at somebody like you and be like, you're way too skinny now.
Yeah.
Because everyone else is fatter. You're way too skinny. You're unhealthy because you're too skinny.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're always afraid to kind of tell the truth, because the worst thing you can do in 2021 is hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I've gone past it.
Yeah.
I've gone past it. I'm like, I'm just going to hurt your feelings. I don't care. Like, if that's how it goes, like,
Yeah.
what I say normally, which would have been accepted 10 years ago, hurt your feelings now, well, that's a you thing, not a me thing. I'm just so over it at this point.
Yeah.
With, like, being sensitive of this. Oh, you can't say that. Like, what did I say? Like, like, what did I say now?
Because it's true, and they don't want to hear the truth because it might hurt them. You might hurt feelings.
It's so, dude. So if I ever offend anyone, just don't follow me. That's fine. I'm not going to change the way I talk. So I've tried every week at something, man. Every week. So yeah, fat is worse for you than being lean. That's a fact. Sorry. So if it offends you, sorry that science offends you. Facts don't care about your feelings. So I guess with that, we'll leave this one for another episode.
Yes,
but I'm on board with that. That one's a good one.
This is going to be a good topic, and we'll definitely dive into it deeper in an upcoming episode. So please stay tuned for that. But yeah, I just figured, you know what? It is a thing. It is becoming more normal.
Yeah,
so.
It sucks when you're a guy like me, especially, like, you know, I take that seriously. You know, it's like I took an oath almost. You know, like to take a fight against fat. Mm-hmm. You know, and like when you hear these things, like, and I always say it to myself, and it's always like something I always remind myself of. I picked a fight with fat, and I'm losing. I always say that. Like, how can I? Every day I say that, and I'm like, how can I make that? How can I win the fight a little more today? You know, and like for me, we're getting there. We're getting there. You know, we're getting to the point where we're going to have a real impact on it. You know, and what if it's just, you know, what if it's just 10 people? You know, 10 people is more powerful than one. So if you can use yourself to help 10 people, then it's like that's a really positive thing. It's going to have a down run on that. So that's definitely one of my missions in life, if not my main mission. But the reality of like people that are fighting against that are winning. You know, they're like, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. I'm like, no, but it's not. Like the science, like if the science showed that we were wrong and it makes you healthy and fat's nothing wrong with fat, I'd be all for it. Like, hey, do what you got to do, whatever. It doesn't matter. But it's taking years off people's lives, you know.
Yeah, and quality of life.
And
too.
quality of life and confidence and everything, you know. So it's like, yeah, I hate that narrative's out there. I'm always going to be an anti-fat acceptance person, and if that makes me like, if someone don't like that, too bad. That's what I stand for. So. But anyway, I'm excited to dive into that one because that's going to be a good one. And so with that, we will leave you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you like the new set.
Yes.
It'll be improved week by week. We're not sure.
You need to wear brighter colors next time, Adam, to match our backdrop.
Yeah. Well, we were going to do a green screen too. And then I was like, Ashley, good thing you didn't wear a green screen. You'd be like a floating head today.
Oh, that would be awesome. Can we be floating heads for a future podcast?
We could probably do that.
They have, what are they, a V vloggers or something? Virtual vlog? Like they're just an anime character, or you can create any character.
Oh, really?
And it matches your movements. You've seen it with the emojis, right? So they have like the emojis, but now they have like the full, like, people are doing it on YouTube. They're actually like characters that they can dance and they can talk and your mouth moves with it. It's crazy. We should do that sometime.
We should. That's cool.
Yeah. And you could pick random things too. It could be food items.
Huh. Okay.
That's going to be, I'm sure Anya's going to be so excited to dive into that.
Cool.
When she edits everything.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and talk to you next time.